Hello and welcome again to another edition of Lost in Science across Australia on the Community Radio Network. This is half an hour on your radio where we talk about science. And who are we? Well, I am Stu. And on this week's show, I'm going to be talking about the Chinese space station Tiangong and its unceremonious departure from our celestial heavens. Ooh, splash down in the ocean, but also
that's the soundscape.
That's our special effects department there.
Yeah, Claire's on Foley today.
But I'm also going to be talking about, the future of space stations. Why do we need space stations, and who's got space stations up there, and who will have space stations up orbiting the Earth in the future?
It's not who you think.
It's not who you think necessarily, and it's interesting who's got the capability to put things up at the moment, but we'll get to that later in the show. Claire, what have you got for us this week?
Well, I recently returned from New Zealand, and there are some Australian native species that have gone a little bit feral in New Zealand. And you would probably, when I say that, you probably think of one thing.
Possums is what springs to mind.
Possums is what springs to mind. However, there is another Australian native that is wreaking havoc over there. I'm going to talk a little bit about that and tell a very interesting story about an Australian native species that was thought to be extinct but was found in New Zealand. Anyway,
wow.
I won't reveal any more.
Well,
you can't make me.
You're
going to have to listen.
Please reveal more later in the show.
I will reveal more later in the show.
Okay. It is interesting, though, because, New Zealand, they have all sorts of feral problems because there's no predators.
There's no mammals apart from a couple of bats.
No native mammals, but there's lots of other mammals that are running wild.
Mammals now.
Rabbits, hedgehogs,
oh my goodness.
Ferrets.
Rats.
Stoats.
And those things, stoats.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. Oh, lucky New Zealand. And also Chris will be joining us to talk about the recent, well, I don't know if it's a discovery or an announcement, but basically some researchers have claimed to discover a new organ in the human body which was hiding in plain sight all along.
A new organ?
Yeah. Not a Hammond.
Is it a big one or a small one?
It's not a pipe organ like in the town hall. No. It's supposed to be. Well, they're claiming it's the biggest organ in the human body. It's called the Interstitium, Chris will explain what that actually is and whether or not it's something that they can really lay claim to. We'll have to stay tuned for that later in the show. So please do. Space flight followers will probably have been following the demise of the Chinese Tiangong 1 space station, which was launched back in 2011 for an intended 2-year mission. It was designed to test out various technologies for the Chinese space program and repeatedly had its mission extended until it stopped responding to ground controls in 2016. So basically, it's been out of control since 2016.
And it's basically becoming the Skylab of the 21st century. Is that correct?
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
Those who don't remember, Skylab was an American space station that similarly didn't last as long as meant to, I think.
Well, this one lasted longer than it was meant to,
okay.
but they lost control of it before they had a chance to guide it back to Earth. So its orbit deteriorated, and being out of control, nobody knew exactly where it was going to come down to Earth. But on the 2nd of April, Chinese officials say the vehicle came down. Not that much of it would have actually hit the surface. The majority of the craft burned up on re-entry. And as it was over the Pacific Ocean, whatever was left is now either sinking or already on the seabed. So China had already launched another space station back in 2016 called Tiangong 2. Tiangong means heavenly palace. which is just
Sounds
what they,
appropriate.
yeah, what they called it, because you could they actually sent Chinese astronauts up there and stuff, and they are planning a permanent modular space station to be in orbit in the early 2020s, because they also plan to land people on the moon and to launch probes to Mars. So their space station will be integral to those missions because it'll provide them with a sort of halfway point or a starting point for those missions, but also because the International Space Station is kind of winding down.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so the ISS has been in orbit for 17 years, and it's currently in low Earth orbit, which means below 2,000 kilometres off the ground. But it's only projected to be in use for another 10 years. So by 2028...
That's a fairly good lifespan, though.
Yeah, it is. But by the time the Chinese get their permanent space station up, it'll only have about 5 years left on its proposed run.
Will they let other people use their station, though, as well?
Well, this is the tricky thing is... So the ISS, the International Space Station, consists of modules provided by the United States and separate modules provided by the Russian space agency Roscosmos. And there has been talk of Roscosmos and NASA cooperation on a replacement space station, but nothing official has actually confirmed whether that's happening or not. So it may well be that the Chinese space station is the only, inhabitable space station that's up there at the time. So negotiations about this sort of thing are, this has to happen at some point because otherwise that will be the end of the US capabilities in that area, I guess. So just a little bit about the ISS. So the Russian modules on the ISS are designed to be autonomous to some degree. So they're supposed to be capable of docking and connecting themselves. So they connect essential services like power and all that sort of stuff without a crew. So they could probably sort of recycle those modules and maybe hook them onto the Chinese one when they finally get that going, potentially.
As long as the parts are compatible. It's not the kind of thing you want to really take chances with.
No, but I mean, I guess you could sort of get adapters. I mean, they could engineer something to connect them up.
Probably,
I'm sure.
Yeah.
Power is power. It just needs to go through a transformer or something like that.
Yeah, I'm just thinking make sure all the bits fit properly and there's no gaps where air can leak out. And
You certainly wouldn't want that sort of that sort of thing. But the Russians designed their modules with the idea that they could be sent in advance of human-led missions to other planets, so that the modules would arrive first, configure themselves into an orbiting space station, so that when people arrived, they would have an orbital base that they could then have, landings on the surface and that sort of thing. So it's a pretty cool idea. They haven't done it yet. They haven't tried it out over those distances. All they've done is put them up into low Earth orbit around our planet, and that worked pretty well. So that's, it's a good test, I guess. But in the short term, the ISS is serviced by Soyuz rockets, which are provided by the Russians, and Dragon rockets, which are owned by SpaceX, who's an American aerospace company. So at present, the US government doesn't have any vehicles capable of either delivering cargo to a space station or retrieving it to bring it back to Earth, including passengers. So that's a bit of a worry for the US space program, is that they basically don't have anything to get people or stuff up and down out of space.
They've privatised. They're letting Elon Musk solve their problems, much like South Australia is.
Well, yeah, possibly. I don't know how that. Will Trump's proposed Space Force be a private enterprise, or will that be a government agency?
They'll have the best epaulettes on any outfit, I'm sure. The Space Force.
They'll be designed by the best designers from Project Runway or something. Yeah. So look, I think the space station idea, and there've been space stations since the sort of 70s. They had Mir, and they've had
and Skylab,
which crashed to Earth in Western Australia, actually. But we're still a long way from the elegant rotating space stations of Arthur C. Clarke's 2001 that turn slowly in time with classical music.
Do you reckon we'll ever get there, or because it seems like we also know that the orbit, the Earth's orbit, particularly the low Earth orbit, is getting quite crowded with space junk, and we've seen the movie Sandra Bullock's movie Gravity. I don't want like a big spinning wheel that's going to get
hit by stuff all the time.
Yeah.
Well, look, there are other options, like the space elevator concept might be a better option than having.
Doesn't sound better to me.
Well,
you need somewhere to tether it to.
Yeah, the Earth.
It's a long way up. Well, the other end is going to be.
Well, yeah, but then you have the idea is it's far enough out that it's actually in orbit, but they're just connected by a tether.
Yeah,
you wouldn't go up on that. They reckon it'll take a couple of weeks to get up the thing.
Yeah.
I don't know. But look, this sort of thing may be a long way off yet anyway, because even the new Chinese designs is basically a whole bunch of cylinders stuck together in various patterns, where they're easy to dock together, I guess, and just with solar arrays and that sort of stuff. But we'll, in the next 10 years or maybe the next 20 years, we'll see a lot more people working and living in space, even if it's only temporarily. But like if I look back on the space age of the mid 20th century, it looks like that was only the beginning of the space age, and we're sort of going through a resurgence right now. And in the next 10 years or so, we'll probably see even more space travel. Across Australia on the Community Radio Network, you're listening to Lost in Science.
When you think about Australian animals that are now feral in New Zealand, you think of one animal, don't you?
I do. I think of the possum.
The possum.
Because
the one,
actually someone's brought back a possum skin hat for me from New Zealand. I don't have it anymore, but
it was brought back for you.
Because in New Zealand they're a pest animal, and therefore you're allowed to make hats out of them.
That's
which
right.
You're not allowed to do here.
That's true. They are a protected species in Australia, not in New Zealand.
Mm-hmm.
Well, do you think about wallabies as a pest species in New Zealand?
It's a big jump. I'm just saying, how did they get there? A possum you could smuggle in a suitcase. A wallaby, it's a bit different.
Oh, well, do I have a story for you?
Lay it on me.
Yeah, hop it on me. No? Jump it on me?
No.
Wear it like
Pull
a
it out
jumper?
of your pouch.
All right. Okay. So wallabies are actually a huge problem in New Zealand. Not because they're predators for native flightless birds like the possums are, but because they forage on native plants. They also eat farming pastures, so they're impacting on both agriculture and biodiversity. Anyway, they are now the object of a large-scale campaign to eradicate them. And when I was in New Zealand, I saw stickers everywhere saying, "Protect your country from wallaby invaders. Identify, report, destroy."
Goodness me.
I know, yeah.
Serious business.
It is totally serious. This is the Otago Regional Council, so around the Dunedin area, and they mean business. They really want the wallabies gone. So I know you want to know how this happened.
I do want to know how this... Do they have any idea how many wallabies they've got? That's one thing that I'd be curious to know.
There is surprisingly little information as to how many wallabies they have. But from interviews with farmers, they shoot up to like 1,000 in a season.
So multiple farmers shooting
No, this
thousands.
is one farmer on one farm shooting up to 1,000.
Wow.
So they're a big
They're literally in plague proportions as far as they're concerned.
Yes.
Okay.
And they're really cute as well.
Yeah.
Which is...
Yeah, wallabies are like the kangaroo's cuter cousin.
It is, yeah, exactly. Okay, so let me cast your mind back to the 19th century. So between 1858 and 1870, there were a whole range of marsupials that were let loose in New Zealand. And potentially for hunting purposes, potentially for other reasons, there is very little detail about how many were released and what species were released. But
So
they
what did they
suspect
just
up to...
load up a boat with it's like Noah's Ark, and they just let them go.
The information around this is very vague. Very, very vague. And so it turns out they didn't really know what was hopping around the island. But what they do know is the only species to survive from the 12 marsupial species were brush-tailed possums and wallabies, and they're the ones that have become successfully established. So the wallabies and the possums came at the same time.
Okay.
Yeah.
So do they in animal terms they call it naturalized? Because if a plant sort of becomes feral, they say it's naturalized in the country where it is. But I don't know if that's the term they use for animals.
I haven't heard that term used for animals, but possibly. I mean, we were talking before about the possums becoming somewhat different to Australian possums and taking on this carnivorous nature.
Yeah. So they may be adapting to the new environment. That could be a whole new species of carnivorous possums. We could use them to breed back into Tasmanian tigers to take the place of the predators that we've lost.
Oh goodness. Oh dear. Anyway, so these wallabies weren't as hated as much as they are now. It wasn't until 1956 that the wallabies became listed as noxious in the Noxious Animals Act in New Zealand. And for at least the past 20 years, they've been extensively controlled. Anyway, so when the wallabies were listed as noxious, they had to look into the taxonomy. So what actual species had been let go and what species were established now and where were they?
So I guess they had to do that. I mean, you've got to write a piece of legislation
Exactly.
saying this is the animal that we're chasing.
Animal.
So you've got to know what species it is. And they didn't know.
And they didn't know before that. So it wasn't until, the 1950s that they found out what wallabies they had. And they all just refer to them as the wallabies, even though they had discovered that there were 6 wallaby species in New Zealand. So it isn't just one species. It's
There's 6 species of different wallabies. Yes. Wow.
So 4 species are found on Kauai Island, which is an island. I'm probably saying that incorrectly. It's an island off Auckland.
And they're contained on that island?
And
they're
not
found
contained on
anywhere
that
else?
island, yep. And then there is the Dharma wallaby, which is found around Rotorua, and the Bennett's wallabies, which are populated in the South Island, so around South Canterbury and North Otago. But going back to Kauai Island, where there were these 4 different species of wallabies. So in 1965, the workers on Kauai Island were attempting to control plague proportions of a certain species of wallaby. This is the Tamar wallaby. You might have heard of this wallaby before. It's a pretty, it's pretty popular. Well, it's pretty populated in Australia. It's pretty common.
Okay. Yeah.
Anyway, so while they were doing this culling, they were quite surprised to discover that some of these wallabies weren't Tamar wallabies at all, but miraculously a surviving population of a type of wallaby called the Palmer wallaby. Yes, like the Parmigiana. No, not like the Parmigiana.
Palmer like Clive Palmer.
Like Palmer with an A. Parma.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So it is like
It is
Palmer.
like but it isn't short for Parmigiana wallaby.
It's
Although
not.
wouldn't it be great if it was?
Wallaby Palmer. Palmer Wallaby Palmer.
Palmer wallaby Palmer. Anyway, so this surprise that they felt for discovering the Palmer wallaby, need to understand a little bit of history. At that time, in 1965, the whole world thought the Palmer wallaby was extinct. And not just newly extinct in Australia, but extinct since the 19th century. So
no one had seen one in Australia
no
since
one had seen one
the
in
19th
Australia
century.
since the 19th century.
Right.
And then they popped up as a invasive species, as a noxious species.
Except presumably the guy who the people who loaded them onto a boat and sent them to New Zealand. They must have seen them.
They must have seen them. So the Palmer wallaby, it's actually the smallest wallaby getting around. It's 1/10 the size of a red kangaroo. So it's quite small. It looks a lot like a paddy melon if you know
so
what
a little
paddy melon.
tiny wallaby.
Very, very small. Yeah. It's got greyish brown fur and it's quite white under the chin.
So do you know where they were found in Australia before they were extinct?
Well, I think they were found around South Australia.
Okay.
But hold that thought because I will come back to it. Anyway, so the wallaby extermination effort, it was put on hold and the Palmer wallabies were captured and sent to zoos around Australia in the hope that they could breed in captivity and could eventually be reintroduced to their native habitat. Anyway, following this, for the next 15 years, Palmer wallabies were protected in New Zealand, so they went off the noxious list to the protected list.
So they've got a pest problem, but because they're an extinct animal, they get protection.
They get
Look,
protection.
I guess that's kind of fair enough.
It's very fair enough, I think.
I think we'd do the same for them if there was a New Zealand
What if
animal.
there was a
that
noxious kiwi on the list?
Some ground parrot that we found in plague proportions. We'd just, we've got to protect
It's
it.
okay. It's okay. We will protect the Kia. Anyway, so this lasted till 1984.
Yeah.
And then in 1984, with the security in Australia confirmed, the ban on the Palmer was lifted. People could...
It was open season.
It was open season on the Palmer.
It's Palmer season.
Yeah. So miraculously now, due to this effort and also a discovery that Palmer wallaby populations in New South Wales, like north of Gosford, they found them there as well, like completely unrelated populations. So back to your question about where they actually exist in Australia, they're also around New South Wales on the coastal region. So this has led to the Palmer wallaby going from the classification of extinct to now being the somewhat better classification of near threatened.
Oh, not even endangered.
Not even
near
endangered.
threatened.
Yeah.
Oh, that's pretty good.
That's pretty great, isn't it?
That's a great leap.
Yeah. So I think it's a really interesting story about not rushing into culling and using science to inform how to get the best biodiversity outcomes.
For everyone.
A hopping good story.
You're traveling through another dimension. A dimension not only of sight and sound, but of mind. A journey into a wondrous land whose boundaries are that of imagination. That's the signpost up ahead. Your next stop.
Lost in Science.
Okay, you're listening to Lost in Science of the Community Radio Network. My name is Chris, and like you may have, I saw some news recently about the discovery of a new organ. I'm doing the quotey fingers there.
Yeah, I did see this, and it did make me read the article because I thought, where could you possibly find a new organ?
This is a new organ, a human body organ, I should say. Yes, they called it the Interstitium. Now, what it is a network of channels, I suppose you could say, between the cells of the body, and this network carries fluid. Some news stories say, claim that it could be the biggest organ in the human body that has just been hiding in plain sight all along.
So this means that all of those trivia questions about what's the biggest organ in the body will be wrong now. Used to be the skin.
Well, I don't think this one is fully accepted enough. But look, I've got to say, it did make me chuckle a bit, this story, because every few years there is a story about a new organ discovered or a new body part. And it's always met with the same kind of incredulity, the same level of surprise, saying, oh, even the 21st century, we're still finding new parts of the body. I even saw one person on Twitter who was using this discovery of the Interstitium as a reason to deny climate change. They're basically saying, oh, well, if, all the scientists didn't even know that this existed until last week, why should we believe 97% of them saying that the climate is changing?
That's quite outrageous.
Yeah. Anyway. But look, there are still things in the body being discovered. But you always find there is a reason why they've taken so long to figure out. So the most recent one that I could find was January 2017. There was, I don't know if you remember, there were the mesentery, which is kind of a double fold of the abdominal lining and the peritoneum. And it basically is a bit of a fold that holds the intestine in place. It had been known of for centuries, but it was kind of only reclassified as an organ last year. So that was kind of a new organ again, in quotation marks.
Is there a body of physiologists who sit around deciding what are organs and what aren't organs?
I think it's generally just vague consensus. The mesentery appeared in Grey's Anatomy, and that was like not the TV show, the actual book.
The book Grey's Anatomy,
yeah.
which the TV show stole the title from.
That's right.
Yeah.
So that was its big marker. In 2013, there was Dewar's layer, which wasn't an organ, but it was, I suppose, the sixth layer of the cornea in the eye. Now, it's only 15 micrometers thick, and basically it's still controversial. Not everyone agrees that it exists. So,
Is it made of scotch?
No.
Not
DUA.
Oh, right.
So,
DUA.
So that one is basically not kind of totally verified.
Still not accepted by everyone?
Yeah. So that's another reason
Okay.
why that one was listed. But this one, then this is the interesting one though. Not completely new, obviously, but the full extent of the clitoris was only discovered in the past 20 years by Australian urologist Helen O'Connell, who did some dissections in 1998 and eventually a full 3D ultrasound in 2009 to discover the full extent of the clitoris. So you can probably guess the reason why this one took so long. Sexism.
Yeah, well, it took a female physiologist to investigate it thoroughly enough by the sound of things.
Essentially. Yeah. But with the interstitium, again, we knew something about it. People knew that there was this connective tissue between cells. They knew there was interstitial fluid. They basically knew how much there needed to be. This interstitial fluid is also known as lymph. You may have heard of it. It connects to the lymphatic system. Lymph is it's a yellowy kind of liquid similar to blood plasma. It's that transparent stuff that oozes from sores, after it stopped bleeding, really.
I don't know. I just bandage it up and carry on. Usually.
Surely when you're a kid, you would have noticed this kind of sticky stuff.
Probably.
So the thing about all this stuff, though, this bit between the cells, is it's really hard to see. See, the problem is that when you look under tissue under a microscope, you've got to slice it very thin. You've got to treat it with chemicals, and essentially it's dead tissue, obviously.
Yeah.
So it behaves differently to living tissue, and in particular the gaps between cells. They saw these gaps between cells, but didn't really realize kind of what was going on there.
So it sort of collapses a bit too, I guess.
Yeah,
and it's
basically.
it's not
and
functioning properly.
You
so
slice it thinly, and all the liquid drains away as
yeah,
well.
Yeah.
So this latest discovery was started basically in 2015 with some endoscopists in New York. They were investigating a patient's bile duct. They were looking for signs of cancer, and they were using a technique called confocal laser endomicroscopy with a fluorescein injection. Basically, they stick a laser microscope inside you, so they can look at living tissue, living functioning tissue. And what they found was a small bit of the interstitial space having a depth of 60 to 70 micrometers and filled with lymph. And they saw connecting to the lymph nodes, where the lymph would drain into the lymph nodes. And they saw it supported by this network of collagen fibers and stuff. They basically saw essentially this whole kind of structure with all this lymph flowing through it. And they said, what's this? This is not in the textbooks. So they saw that in the bile duct. Then they began to look at a lot of other parts of the body, and they found it in the stomach and intestines, other parts of the digestive system, the esophagus. They saw it around the muscles and in fat and around veins and arteries, and then skin, and basically realized that this stuff is pretty much everywhere.
So it's basically, this is the spaces between cells are full of a fluid, and there's a structural component holding it all together, sort of.
Yeah. And
it's very, very similar to plants in a way.
Yeah,
plants
basically
have cell walls, and that's all usually full of fluid, and we're sort of more like plants than we thought, maybe.
Perhaps, yeah. Look, the liquid is believed to account for about 20% of our body weight, which is why it's considered the largest organ.
Now, this was something I think I read in the article too. Is that there was a part of our body mass that they couldn't account for.
Well, they couldn't, I suppose. The references that I've seen looking back earlier than this discovery would talk about this amount of the interstitial fluid and how much there was of it. I guess they just didn't know where it went in the body. Okay. So, but yeah, they knew that it was there.
They just figured it was there somewhere.
Yeah, they knew it. They knew it was there. They knew how much lymph or interstitial fluid there was.
Okay.
They just didn't exactly know how it all fit together. So yeah, there's been a bit of exaggeration there, I think. And also the idea of calling it a new organ. This is what they have called it in their publication. It's not an official classification. Other people, have to agree on that it is actually an organ.
So what are they, if it's an organ, what is its function? What does it do?
Well, they're saying that it does stuff like, obviously the lymph transports lots of chemicals, nutrients to cells, but also toxins away from cells, as well as like messengers and chemicals between cells.
Hormones and things like that.
Yeah, that kind of stuff. And it also, I believe it's a cushioning for tissue, like a kind of a shock absorber thing that, basically the liquid between the tissues acts like a shock absorber.
Oh, right. So if you hit something, it sort of squishes all the liquid out of the interstitium.
Yeah.
And then it flows back in when it gets uncompressed.
Yeah, they've noticed it a lot in parts of the body that compress and uncompress a lot. So muscles, obviously, but the digestive system, anything where there's a lot of movement and compressing and uncompressing, they find a lot of this stuff. So yeah, it does seem to have that shock absorber thing. On the negative side, it could also be involved in spreading diseases, including cancer. It might explain how cancer can metastasize and spread to other parts of the body. But yeah, look, this is not the first time either that something like this has been seen. A couple of years ago, there was also a discovery of a similar kind of network in the brain that again was using a new microscopic technique using fluorescence to see how living tissue functions. So essentially what we're seeing is we're finding new technology that allows us to see living human body functioning, and we're discovering new things about it, which, when you put it that way, is not so surprising. I guess it's just surprising that some of this stuff is so big that we didn't really understand it.
That's all we've got time for on this episode of Lost in Science. Thanks for tuning in and joining us. Lost in Science is recorded at the studios of 3CR in Melbourne and broadcast across Australia on the Community Radio Network with the financial assistance of the Community Broadcasting Foundation. If you want to talk to us, talk back to us, you can get in touch. We have a Gmail account, lostinsci@gmail. You can also find us on Twitter and on the Facebook. And if that's not enough Lost in Science for you, you can always tune in again next week, where the team will once again get Lost in Science!
Thanks for listening to a 3CR podcast. 3CR is an independent community radio station based in Melbourne, Australia. We need your financial support to keep going. Go to www.3cr.org.au for more information and to donate online.